Hello everybody, welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel. We are live here today giving you your midweek injury update, all the essential information, but we thought we'd go live because there's a lot to pack in. If you've got any questions, please do put them in the comments below. But Ben, my goodness, where do we even start? Because there is a lot of essential information that people need to know at the moment.
Exactly, mate. Where do we start? The midweek or Thursday night round of Premier League fixtures, a double game week. FPL managers waiting on a lot of potential returners and keeping their fingers crossed that other players are back in contention and recover from knocks. But we've had some late breaking news this afternoon. And like I say, I thought it would be easier just to jump on a quick stream to be able to go through all of those because there's a lot to try and digest.
Yeah, so I guess, do we start alphabetically? Do we go with Arsenal, Aston Villa? I mean, who's the first on your list, Ben?
Well, let's go with Aston Villa. A lot of people asking questions with regards to the availability of Lucas Digne. And of course, we referenced the potential quick return to play on Saturday in our video under new government protocols, which in turn leads into a way of handling the players differently within the clubs and their ability to train individually, and maintain those base levels of fitness. The long and the short of it, Steven Gerrard basically confirms that Marvelous Nakamba is the only player sidelined. So that means that Ezri Konsa and Lucas Digne do return to the matchday squad. Now, will he start? For me, and again, this is something we already did touch upon, Villa coming off the back of that great performance last weekend, was it 4-0 win over Southampton, unexpected. They then have a trip on Sunday to West Ham away. Now, for me, it could be that Steven Gerrard may be tempted to stick with that starting 11. He's had plenty of recovery days in and around there, and he may look to change things up on Sunday. So I've seen examples of FPL managers with the likes of Reece James on the bench and other players, and it's a lot of be impacted massively from this Lucas Digne, will he or won't he appearance. I'm sitting on Paul Pogba as first sub, so there is an assist in there as well, but that assist would be better than a 5 or 10 minute cameo, and that one pointer. So I'm hoping he stays out of it this week, and I'm not saying I'm confident he may not start, but like I say, whether Steven Gerrard wants to put a few minutes in his legs ahead of that West Ham game remains to be seen.
Is this the type of injury then, Ben, that he can come straight back in the team? He won't be too deconditioned. There's no massive risk of re-injury.
COVID. It was a COVID absence with Konsa. So in terms of, like I say, those expedited protocols within the club, he can train individually. He can train actually within the club as well. Government guidelines do state that he doesn't need to remain in his house anymore. He can train in isolation down on the pitch. So he's able to do a lot of sport-specific stuff. So in terms of maintaining those base levels, then he'd be absolutely fine.
So who is next on the hit list, Ben? I hope you're not breaking any more FPL hearts there, because a lot of people, like you said, have got Digne in their team, and it might cause a bit of an upset. I mean, you have mentioned Reece James. Do you want to bring him up next?
Yeah, this one came as a bit of a surprise, or not so much as a surprise, as it were. We know that he's returning from a long-term hamstring issue, and he's been involved in the last 3 Chelsea games. Played very well last weekend. I think it was a 4-0 win at Turf Moor. Got himself a goal and an assist. His value, certainly in an attacking sense, it's playing for all to see in fantasy circles. But now it looks as if he's going to be out of that game on Thursday night, and we don't know quite how long it will take for him to return to play. Thomas Tuchel said it was very disappointing, but he has suffered not a reaction to the same hamstring, but certainly a muscular problem related to that return. It's in his other leg, and they're doing further exploratory investigations to determine the extent of that problem. He hasn't been training with the group so far, but they're hopeful that it isn't too serious.
And so with that situation then, Reece James was one of the most transferred in players this game week. Would you be advising people, as usual, just don't be pressing those transfer fingers just yet?
I mean, the concern for me, even heading into game week 28, was Reece James's minutes would be managed. So, I did actually talk, I attempted to put a point of view forward that maybe it was a little bit too soon to be risking investing in Reece James. Of course, he did come off early, but, within that time frame, like I say, he had both attacking, offensive and defensive returns. But look, the advice was still sound. And again, given this little bit of a setback, and also the return of Cesar Azpilicueta, Callum Hudson-Odoi, basically, other than Ben Chilwell and Reece James, Thomas Tuchel has a full strength squad at his disposal. Christensen can come in there, Chalobah can move in. So there are plenty of options on that right-hand side if he wants to change things up. So for me, I would say, it's worth just holding back on the likes of Reece James. Like I say, certainly in terms of maybe making a decision closer to kick-off. But even then, I still see his minutes being managed going forward.
We do have a question from Nuclear Atoms. He says, greetings to you as well. But he also said, I have Fraser. Will he be fit from his muscle injury?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was an injury per se. Ryan Fraser hasn't had a lot of minutes this season, and we've seen in the last 2, 3, 4 performances, he has been struggling during the second half of those second half games, affected by a little bit of fatigue, a little bit of cramp. And he was one of those, like I say, against Brighton, Newcastle players were forced to work really, really hard, particularly during that second half. It was a little bit of an onslaught from the Seagulls. So, like I say, it was more of just a niggle, probably fatigue related. Nothing major to worry about. We have actually heard from Eddie Howe, and like I say, it's basically as you were in terms of their squad. Nothing serious to add to that group. And I think the way Ryan Fraser has been playing and his role within those recent this unbeaten run, then I think he's going to be doing everything he can to get out on the pitch. So I fully expect Ryan Fraser to start for Newcastle on Thursday.
And just as we said at the start there, if you've got any pressing questions, do put them in the comments. But Ben is also pressed for time, school run and everything for you. So we've only got you for a few minutes more. Let's move then to the next players on the injury list that people need to be aware of. I mean, who's the next big name or big team that people need to be drawn attention to?
Yeah, this is a big one, and this doesn't relate to the Premier League for Thursday night's game. This is a Europa Conference League, and we've heard from Brendan Rodgers. Now, unfortunately, Jamie Vardy has suffered a setback, and it looks as if he will be out for another spell on the sidelines. No definitive timeline as such at the moment, but what we understand, it will extend at least until after the international break. Now, fortunately, this doesn't relate to the hamstring problem that he's just returned from. That was in and around 7-8 weeks, I believe. This is a knee injury. So that knee problem is picked up during the win over Leeds is going to keep him out, like I say, for potentially up to a month.
And so is that more or less concerning that it's unrelated to that original injury? I mean, does this speak of possible deconditioning that he's been out for such a long time? Or is this the usual kind of little knock and problem that players have once they come back?
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty here is it's something fairly new. I wasn't really aware of any issues prior to that, so I haven't seen the mechanism of injury. It could have been a contact, an impact, knock, and like I say, that's just a little bit unfortunate. That's unlucky. It's part and parcel of playing in a contact sport. It just so happens that he's coming off the back of this hamstring problem that kept him out for such a long period of time. People may have questioned, that Jamie Vardy came off the bench, had a massive impact at Turf Moor when Leeds won 2-0. He got the assist and the goal, and then he was thrown back in from the start again. But there are some that will even suggest that if it is a contact injury, then, fatigue may be, still a factor in that. It changes your thought process, your reaction times, how you react, your perception, of incoming tackles, of defenders, of your whereabouts. So look, it might have been an accumulation of all of that until we sort of, if I see the problem and the mechanism and when it actually occurred, I can make a more, informed decision, on on why that injury or this setback may have occurred. But typically it's the soft tissues, it's the muscle issues that you're more worried and concerned about, particularly when you're coming off the back of a fairly long-term hamstring injury. We know that re-injury and recurrence rates are at increasing significant levels during that first 28-day period from return to play.
Let's turn our attention to a fellow England international here. Nuclear Atoms has asked, how long is Jared Bowen out for? I've heard it was for several weeks.
We don't have any definitive timeline in terms of that, but we are due to hear from David Moyes very, very soon. Of course, West Ham are involved in the Europa League on Thursday evening. Initial sort of scan MRI imaging results, according to the club anyway, and what I would stress at that point in time, played down the severity of the problem. They said that there was nothing, really sort of bad that was flagged by those imaging. What I would say was that was taken early on Sunday morning, and the player may have been sent for imaging after, subsequent images. We were actually recording at the time of that problem, and from watching, the video footage, my initial thoughts was it was a non-contact, potentially an Achilles problem, and that was a concern. The worry was the medical team were quick out. They had hoped to do some work on the sidelines to maybe get him back out, but the decision was made fairly quickly, to replace him. But post-match, David Moyes put a slightly different spin on the situation. He seemed to suggest or hint that it may have been the ankle or the heel, and it could have been, an impact injury, which, yes, very painful and a worry, but certainly not as bad as what maybe a non-contact Achilles problem could be. But like I say, we'll hear more from David Moyes, hopefully, who can shed some light. But as far as I think it's Richard Collins, the head of medical at West Ham, on Sunday released a statement to say, look, thankfully it doesn't look as if the problem is too serious.
In terms of it, Andrew Williams has asked about the other left back at Chelsea, Marcus Alonso. Any updates there? Again, because Chilwell is going to be out for probably the rest of this season. What's the kind of information around that one?
Yeah, Marcus Alonso missed the last two. That was a COVID-related absence, but he was back on the training pitches from Monday, training with the squad as normal. So providing there are no reaction to that, then you fully expect him to be in the squad on Thursday night.
A couple of people have asked questions about players that we've already covered at the start of the stream. Somebody's asked about Reece James and Digne. So if you do want to know about them, go back to the start of this stream or wait till we've fully uploaded this and then you can watch it a little bit later. But we've got a lot of players to get through, very limited time for Ben. So who else do you want to bring up next in terms of these headliner injuries, because there's so many this week?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to get through them as quickly as I can. We'll stick with Leicester for now. And James Maddison, he's recovered from a lower back issue. James Justin as well, he's also back from a hamstring issue. They will both be involved in that Europa Conference League game on Thursday night. Wesley Fofana, he was hoping to make the squad. However, he's tested positive for COVID. But Brendan Rodgers is cautiously optimistic that he may be back in the squad this weekend. For Wolves, Bruno Lage, Nelson Semedo, hamstring, club say around about 4 weeks. I understand that timeline, maybe, a little bit optimistic. It could be closer to 6 to 8 for him. And also Kijana Hoover, hamstring, are also out. Otherwise, the Wolves squad is pretty much as you were. For Watford, a lot of people, two players that tend to garner the most interest. Joshua King, he missed out as a precaution last weekend from a hamstring problem. Wouldn't surprise me if that was linked to the lower back issue that's been hampering in recent game weeks. He's been back on the training pitches. A late decision will be made on him, but there's a good chance he will travel to Molineux. But Ismail Sarr, Roy Hodgson said that the hamstring injury that he picked up at Old Trafford wasn't too serious, and while he didn't give him, it didn't definitely rule him out of those sort of 3-game block. It looks highly unlikely that he will feature either, well, certainly not on Thursday, but not this weekend either. For the Saints, they're smarting off that 4-0 defeat to Villa. A big absence for them, and partly due to that sort of defeat was with the injury to Mohamed Salazou. He's back on the training pitches as well. Ralph Hasenhüttl said he would make a late call on him. We also have Nathan Tella training with the group again, but he's been out since mid-January, so we're probably not going to see him, maybe not even this weekend. For Newcastle, I've touched upon, obviously, Ryan Fraser. Matt Ritchie, he's back training with the team. Eddie Howe talked about rotation, and maybe freshening the squad, but he said there is a reluctance there because they were in a little bit of rut. We were losing games, and now we're on this unbeaten stretch, and he doesn't want to change things around too much. Alan Saint-Maxim has obviously been key for us in recent times, but picked up that calf problem. What he did say is he isn't 100%, so that maybe suggests that it is another place on the bench for him. Leicester, is anybody interested in Norwich City? No offence. Just Adam Ida and Awedeli are the two players ruled out through injury. Billy Gilmore, of course, he can't line up against his parent club. So that means like Lucas Roop and Ozan Kabak, they're back in contention for the Canaries. In Leeds, lots to talk about. Really enjoyed Jesse Marsh's press conference on Wednesday afternoon. Talked about everything from tactics to rotation to his squad, changing the philosophies. But with regards to the players, some good news. Patrick Bamford will be involved in some capacity, but it won't be from the start. Still not fit enough to get those minutes, but he will be introduced from the bench. Long-term absentees, Liam Cooper, he has rejoined the group in training, although it seems to suggest that he maybe will use his time and the international break as an opportunity to get more load in his legs, and it could be from April that we see him. Calvin Phillips, slightly further behind in terms of his recovery. Jesse Marsh said that was around about a few days. So again, maybe after the international break with regards to him. He confirmed surgery went really well for Tyler Roberts. That was a hamstring problem, which is likely to keep him out for around about 3 to 4 months. And I'm live as well, so I can't swear. Halelja is, apologies if I butchered his name, but the defender, the club were treating a knee problem conservatively. If there was no response within that sort of 2 to 3 to 4 week period, then the decision would be to go under the knife. He has had that surgery. Jess Marsh said it was a lot better than initially anticipated. They've trimmed what you suspect to be that cartilage, and it'll definitely be weeks as opposed to months, and there's a strong possibility that he could return this season.
I have to say, Ben, really well done with holding in the naughty words there. I'm very proud of you. In terms of it, then, we've got a few more final questions here. We're going to be rounding up very, very soon. As said here, Ben has to pop off. So, people, if you do have any final questions, we're going to answer them very briefly, but do send them in. Maddison, any quick update there, Ben?
Fit and available, and will be in the squad on Thursday night.
Excellent. Then we're moving to somebody has asked about DCL. Should I buy? The thing is with him, like we talked about with earlier players in this, when you return to play after an extended time of injury, you're not going to be shooting high at those levels. And so the problem is with Dominic Calvert-Lewin is he's still got he's returned to play, but he's not returned to high performance levels just yet. And as we've seen, Everton as well have a lot of problems. So I would advise any sort of against any sort of investment in the Toffees at the moment. I don't know if that's something that you agree with there, Ben, at all.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, it's a risk if you're talking about, if you're thinking about bringing in DCL. One, yeah, he's still finding his feet following that injury, and he's had lots of little niggling setbacks most recently that have ducked that problem as well. So that's impacted on him, and just Everton generally, just not very consistent. They've been okay at Goodison Park, but away from home, Frank Lampard's talked about this mindset and this soft underbelly, and that lack of character within that team. That's not somebody that would necessarily want to invest in at this moment.
Now, let's move it to Manchester. There's a couple of questions about players from there. First of all, I'm going to do my best impression. Ronaldo. What is the update on his hip injury there?
Yeah, hip flexor. So that's in and around that sort of that groin area. It's nothing new. This is something that was aggravated and caused a time loss absence back in January. It's being managed. Of course, it kept him out the Manchester derby. As it currently stands, he still isn't training with the group, although I believe he is back in Manchester. So, like I say, not with the squad, probably doing some individual work. And at the moment, it's going to depend on that, how he reacts and his response to when he increases the intensity, hopefully within the training. Now, of course, Manchester United are one of the few teams that do play on Saturday this week, so we don't have a lot of time for that quick turnaround. But, given the fact that, they were quite soundly beaten by City last weekend, I think Ralph Rangnick will give him every opportunity to prove himself. But as we've seen with Edinson Cavani, he had 3 good solid days of training under his belt, but then overnight, maybe there was a slight reaction. There was a little bit of uncertainty, certainly from the player, and that caused him to miss the game. So, when we talk about a return to play, isn't necessarily return to performance. Also, a return to train doesn't necessarily mean that that player is going to be involved in the matchday squad.
Nuclear Adams has praised my Ronaldo impression there. Ben, do we get Sue from you as well?
See.
There you go.
Felt like I was going to the
toilet. Let's move it to the other team in Manchester, the Blues side. We got questions about Cancelo and Diaz. Pep Guardiola said that Cancelo was sick, but not in the sense that he's a very, very good player. It's that he's not very well at the moment. What's the kind of update with that situation? And then I think Diaz is more longer term, isn't he, Ben?
Yeah, we're looking at 4 to 6 for Diaz, which came as a little bit of a surprise. Initially, Pep spoke post-match, I think was at Peterborough in the FA Cup, and he said, it was more of a precautionary withdrawal, there was a little bit of discomfort there, which at the time, then, that he may have been right and that injury may have evolved, and they sent for imaging, then discovered the extent of that. So that's certainly an indication that we're looking at around about a grade 2. So maybe after, maybe early to mid-April for Diaz, dependent on, like I say, how he recovers. Got to be very careful with hamstring injuries. And with John Cancelo, we know that Pep has been particularly guarded with regards to his COVID updates. As far as I'm aware, this is just an illness and it's not a COVID absence. Now, City actually play on Monday night, so that will give the likes of Cancelo every opportunity to recover. And like I say, even with COVID and these expedited protocols and return to play strategies, he isn't entirely out of the equation there as well. It's with illness, it always comes down to the individual and how they react. So, you can never be certain 100% with that. But, ideally, we need to be seeing Cancelo on the training pitches Saturday or Sunday, to put him in with a chance.
So Ari Edan has asked about Ben Mee, and then I think that will have to be the last question, Ben, because you really do need to depart.
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, 2 young children ruining my life, but there you go. Can I say that live on it? Let's hope they're not watching. Yeah, Ben Mee took a whack to the knee. So, in the grand scheme of things, there was no twist, there was no strain. Didn't look as if there was any kind of ligament or capsule damage in there. So in that sense, really, really good. The quick turnaround for Gameweek 28 meant, it was always going to be a push. A lot of it comes down to maybe a little bit of swelling and certainly a lot of pain management. Given the fact that he's had more or less a full week to recover now, I think that really puts him in a good place. Hopefully, if there's been no reaction, or like I say, the injury hasn't evolved to an extent where, maybe something underlying has occurred, then Ben Mee is a player that I would expect to come back into that Burnley starting 11, particularly after their poor performance last weekend.
Well, there you go, everybody. We've answered as many questions as possible. We have gone through every player. So just to remind people once again, if you've missed any of the updates, rewind it back to the start. We've covered all the people in the kind of promo picture and a few others as well, because there is a lot of injury news this game week. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because once again, we're the only place that gives impartial and accurate information into all these injuries. You hear a lot of rumor or misinformation. We don't do that here. We just give you clear analysis. And so, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you stay tuned, and we will see you again very soon. But for now, I'm going to wish you the best of luck, the best of health, and we will